I'm just going to wait for it to start so I can read it. I'm just going to wait for it to start so I can read it. I'm pinned. Okay, so I think it's good to go. If there's a problem, I guess just write a message or let me know. So, nice to see you all. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Siddhantotpala Sara Nityarasikam Hamsam Vilasatmakam Odaryatya Sudama Sevakaranam Vishramba Bhakti Param Yachna Yukti Vichakshanam Tagabido Vaishishta Shakya Sada Vande Ham Tripurari Namakayatim Shri Bhakti Vedantinam Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityanando Sahodito Gurudaya Pushpavanto Chitro Shando Tamonudo Vande Ham Shri Rama Krishno Abhaya Charana Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, hello everybody. So here we are again. Let's see where speaking about this is the third class on the that I'm giving on the third verse of the Siksastakam, which of course is Trinadapi Sunechena Taroriva Sahishnuna Amaninam Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Gumaraj translates it as being humble like a blade of grass, being more tolerant than a tree, expecting no admiration yet showing others veneration. One should glorify Hari constantly. So, this is our third class. Just a brief recap. I kind of went through just a little bit about the Siksastakam and where this verse is found in the context of the Siksastakam. Oh, I got signed out. Hey, Sham. It says you have been signed out because your account is signed in from another device.
I guess, but none of us forgot about you.
Can you guys hear me? It looks like it's still going.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I got some thing on my screen that said I had been signed out. So, but it seems like okay. So yeah, sorry. Just a quick recap as we spoke briefly about the Siksastakam, where this verse is found in the Siksastakam. So in the context of where it's found, being one of the few things penned directly by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then I went and kind of located the verse where it's found in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's found in 3 places, and we went through each of the 3 places where it's found. The first place that it's found is kind of in the context of explaining the Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam verse, and then it's found in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's interactions with Raghunath Das Goswami in Puri, and then it's found again, of course, in the context of the Siksastakam prayers, which are the very last chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we talked a little bit about how the importance and the emphasis that's put on the verse just by the sheer fact that it's quoted 3 times. 3 is a a number, that something's repeated if it's meant to get a lot of attention. We talked about that. We talked a little bit about some other the context of those verses, and so today I think what we'll talk about is a little bit about how it relates to this the progression of bhakti, the stages of bhakti, and I'd like to talk a little bit about Rupa and Sanatana, because all the devotees are kind of personifications of this third verse, but Rupa and Sanatana, they're really like character studies in humility and tolerance. So anyhow, basically there was this emphasis, I'll just kind of get into it, there was this emphasis in the Chaitanya Charitamrita on this verse, by the fact that it was found 3 times, and then by what the characters in the book were saying around the verse, raising my hands I declare, these types of things, bringing attention to this verse. And all these kind of repetitions and emphasis, both by Mahaprabhu and by Krishnadas Kaviraj himself, is because they're saying, pay attention here, put your effort and your intellect and your energy, into cultivating these qualities, into this verse, into understanding this verse. Juan, estoy ocupado para una hora. Sorry. Put all your energy here, put your intellect here, because following this verse is really kind of the path to prema. So in relation to our practice, this verse kind of it corresponds to the stage of nishta. Gumarj comments that by chanting in this way, by practicing in this way, applying one's heart to the Nam Dharma, Kirtaniya Sada Hari, kind of within this ongoing culture of humility and tolerance, that this stage of nishta is the stage that really kind of brings the world to life. The environment will start to change. Really, what more it's that one's perception of the environment will start to change, because what's going on is one. By following this verse and applying oneself in the context of this verse, you're really bringing kind of your intellect and your faith together in thinking, in engaging oneself, in sincerely trying to cultivate these qualities, in sincerely trying to be mindful of what it means to chant constantly, for example. Perhaps it doesn't actually mean to sit and chant constantly for 24 hours, or nityam bhagavata sevaya, it means to kind of be paying attention to what you're doing, to being mindful. Like the Buddhists talk a lot about mindfulness into these processes. So by doing that, what you're doing is you're applying your intellect and your will in relation to your faith, and this kind of combination of the two things really starts to make one's sadhana intense, and this brings one to the stage of nishta, and then the environment starts to change, or like I said, one's perception of the environment starts to change. First of all, one sees that the environment is speaking. It's not just a dead witness to us as the center, but the environment starts to come to life and starts to speak, and it starts to give advice. It starts to give good advice. It's alive and it's friendly. So this is kind of this stage of nishta where one is really applying oneself in relation to this verse and to the culture of chanting, is the stage that brings the world to life. Tadara Tamo Baba Kama Loba Dasche. This is where these goggles of passion and ignorance, I and mine, greed and lust start to start to fade. It's kind of, I have a pair of sunglasses. They're polar, because here in Costa Rica the sun is really intense, especially when you're driving. And they're these like polarized sunglasses. I don't know exactly what it means, but certainly when I'm wearing them, everything is a little bit like nicer. Like the colors are a little bit brighter, the greens are a little bit greener, and the sky's a little bit bluer and stuff. And when I take them off, it's like a little bit dull, a little bit duller than seeing through these lenses. And so it's kind of the reverse of what we're talking about here, you know, seeing the world through these colored lenses of rajas and tamas. When that starts to dissipate and when it starts to take off those glasses, then the world is not less. The world becomes more bright and more alive. So it's a little bit like the reverse of the glasses that I have. You know, so by doing this, the world is starting to come to life, and one starts to realize kind of the depth of what one is involved in. You know, this is still only the third verse of 8. Third verse of 8. So this kind of tamas and rajas are fading, and you're realizing the extent of the subject that you're involved in, and then you start to see it everywhere. Like Mahaprabhu started to see this teaching everywhere. So, and at this point, like, it's referring to the stage of nishta. We find it in the Bhagavatam too, in a series of famous verses. I think it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur who really kind of showed these stages from Shraddha to Prem in the Siksastakam of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But you know, this is the stage like where rajas and tamas are starting to fade. This is also the stage where one is really starting to deal with kind of the offenses and the durdaivam that was spoken of in the second verse. Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. So nasta prayeshu abhadreshu means that these things, you know, all these kind of what's the word? Inauspicious things are destroyed, almost completely destroyed at this stage by nityam bhagavata sevaya. So this constant service, or in other words, the kirtaniya sada hari that's spoken of in the verse under discussion. And the result is described in these verses of the Bhagavatam, that nasta prayeshu abhadreshu, these inauspicious things are starting to go away. Then bhaktir bhavati naishtiki, right? So irrevocable loving service kind of comes and furthermore tadarajas tamo bhava kama loba deschai. So this kama, loba, I and mine, rajas and tamas, these things start to fade. These are the lenses that we generally see the world through. But when one comes to this stage of offenseless chanting, which this third verse is really describing, it describes the natural humility of the offenseless chanter, the compassion that an offenseless chanter has, compassion free from envy, I should say. The pure heart that is free from false ego, and the respectful attitude towards others. These are the description of someone who's chanting offenselessly. One begins to start to be able to see clearly, like through the lens of sattva. So for Mahaprabhu in this verse, he is the example of this. For him, the trees began to speak. The grass began to speak, and we see this a lot in advanced devotees. Advanced devotees are paying attention. Nityam bhagavata sevaya. This kind of it's not a cultivation anymore, perhaps, but for us, this cultivation of mindfulness, which means that one is mindful. It doesn't mean that one necessarily has to be chanting 24 hours a day. I mean, that's certainly a laudable and great thing to do, but to be mindful of one's service, mindful of one's humility and tolerance, these things throughout the day is also kind of, an element of paying attention, which characterizes these devotees, bhakti or bhavati naishtiki, right? So they're fixed in this. They realize the depth of the subject that they're involved with. They start seeing it everywhere. We see this in Mahaprabhu. That one of the kind of nicest examples of this, kind of seeing this friendly environment, this teaching environment, this good advice everywhere is is later in the later chapters of the Bhagavatam with the Avadut Brahmana. He's a great example of this, and Krishna himself tells the story. I suppose it's in the Uddhava Gita. So it's a really famous part of the Bhagavatam, almost like a second Bhagavad Gita where Krishna himself is giving teachings. So he himself tells the story of this Avadut Brahmana. King Yadu was encountered, I think, he comes across an Avadut wandering around, behaving in all kinds of like unusual ways that he's not used to seeing. But he sees he's peaceful. He has no need for other people. He's without companions. Kind of like Shukadev, kind of obviously an exalted personality. But I think he's behaving. This Avadut Brahman is behaving a little bit more in the sense of an Avadut. Like Nityananda Prabhu is called Nityananda Avadut because often he behaved in kind of unorthodox ways. So King Yadu asks the Avadut Brahman, from where do you get this ecstasy that you can be as you are and behave as you are? Where do you get this joyful wandering from? And the Avadut Brahman replies and saying that he gets this ecstasy from the knowledge he received from his 24 gurus, and then it goes through a list of all these different different things that he considered to be himself, things in the natural world, in the mundane world, in the day-to-day world, that because he was paying attention, the world was speaking to him, and he saw these 24 things as gurus, much the same way that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would see the trees and the grass and whatnot, as teachers. So it's a very beautiful section to go through and study, and I won't go through all 24 of them, but just basic things like by the earth, for example, spoke to him, and he learned of steadiness from the mountains and trees, how to be generous. So the trees were also speaking to him in the same way that they did to Mahaprabhu. How to live for the sake of others. He learned some examples were like from the moon. He learned from different animals, the snake, the moth. He learned from, there's a section there where he learns from Pingala, even a prostitute. I always found it interesting because it seems like there's a lot to be learned from prostitutes. If not from their behavior by what to do, but by not what to do or whatnot. But there's this. It's really nice because you see there's this reverence towards them. Often, actually, here we see like the story of Pingala is quite famous, and even like in the very, very beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he quotes a verse by Bilva Mangala Thakur, where Bilva Mangala Thakur also had a Pingala in his life, but a prostitute who he saw as his guru. But her name was Chintamani. But it's nice. You see this kind of this vision allows one to respect, have the respect that we find in this verse where, my chair sank. Where we see that, and I remember like quite many years ago, Prabhupada also had this respect actually in relation to prostitutes. He had a very, very liberal idea about it. There's a really nice purport that Prabhupada made, speaking about how even prostitutes could be great devotees and whatnot. So anyhow, and the Avadut Brahman goes on. He even sees his own body actually as his guru, something that he learns. Is able to draw out a teaching from his own body, which is also a nice point that it's the body itself is useful and has a positive application. So we see this in great devotees. Certainly we see it in Guru Maharaj. Like here we have these two karao trees down like in the central kind of area in front of the temple and the main cabins. Very beautiful trees, and one kind of goes like this way and one kind of goes like that way. And of course, Guru Maharaj, when he first got here, he saw a Gaur Nitai in them. In the shape of their branches were like the shapes of the arms of Gaur Nitai. And an advanced devotee, a devotee who's paying attention, will see this everywhere. We were in the river once with Guru Maharaj, and he asked us, like, we had a water turbine to generate electricity, and he asked us, like, what is this turbine? He could see. He said it was, we were kind of guessing what he meant by it. He meant, this is, the turbine is Shaktiman and the electricity is Shakti. So the world becomes alive, and there's kind of teachings to be drawn everywhere. The glasses have come off, no longer seeing through the lenses of I and mine. And like Srila Sridhar Maharaj would say, the environment is friendly. There's no more aggressors. And this is a view that comes out in this third verse. There's no more aggressors. Everyone is seen as a helper. At the very least, when expanding on the idea of the tree, Bhaktivinoda says, the tree even though it's assaulted, has someone coming to cut it down, it still gives shade, gives its fruits and whatnot, things like that. So one starts to see that, the environment is friendly. These are helpers. These people who are coming with aggression, they're actually, exhausting my karma. I had done something in the past that deserved this result, and now these are the bearers of that. So actually, I should be thankful towards them. They're helping me burn off my karma. Vrindavan is described this way too. The environment is friendly. Ahobhagyam, Nanda Gopa Vrajokasam, Yam Mitram Paramanandam, Purna Brahma Sanatana. So this idea of friendly dealings is at the basis of reality, and one starts to see this when how does it start again? When these inauspicious things are starting to go away. There's very many beautiful verses like this where the natural world has come alive. One of my favorite ones, I'm not exactly sure why this is one of my favorite verses, but it comes in it's a glorification of Shukadev by Sutta Goswami, and I thought I would just recite it because it's very nice. It's Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam vaipayano viraha kartara ajuhaba putretri tan mayatara taravo binedus tam sarva bhutam hridayam munim anatosmi. And Prabhupada, there's two verses here that are pranams to Sukadeva Goswami. They're very, very nice. Prabhupada here, he translates it as, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage, Sukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing the sacred dad ceremony, his father, Vyasadeva, cried out to him, O my son, O my son. Indeed, only the trees echoed in response to the bereaved father. So that's one translation of it, but when you go and you look at Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's translation of it, it's really nice. He talks about how actually these trees, what's the word? These trees, putretri tan maya taro taravo binedus tam sarva bhutam hridayam munimat anatosmi, that these trees were actually crying out in separation also. So they were commiserating with Vyasadeva that Shukadev had run off into the forest. So there are two different translations of it, and Vishwanath makes this really nice point that these trees, they weren't just echoing in silence, but they were actually crying out, in separation, just like the father Vyasadeva was doing. So anyhow, the point is just that the world comes alive. Needless to say, the emphasis is given to this verse. It's exceptional. And so beyond running through the beginning, middle, and end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, as we kind of went through, it also, goes through the beginning, the middle, and the end of our practice, of our sadhana. In the beginning of bhakti, of course, we know and we've learned that nothing can summon bhakti, as bhakti is entirely independent. She's her own cause. She's completely free to appear wherever she likes. So we know this, but still, these qualities, they certainly aid kind of in the beginning. The Madhyamadikari is characterized as being one who discriminates, and it's said that he shows mercy to the innocent and tends to ignore people who are antagonistic towards bhakti. So he shows mercy to people who are innocent. Another word for innocent, of course, can kind of mean humble. It just means that one is a good candidate or a receptive candidate. So I'm not saying at all that these qualities of humility and tolerance kind of invoke bhakti, because there are many people who are humble because of circumstance. They might not. They're humble because they're poor. They might not be so humble if they win the lottery. So I'm not saying per se that these qualities can invoke bhakti, but still, I mean, it's kind of a general feeling. Everyone knows that these qualities are attractive. They're kind of universally accepted attractive qualities. Bhakti can give her mercy. She can give her mercy to a jerk if she wants. That's totally within her prerogative. But generally, just like everyone else, Krishna, Bhakti Devi, the devotees, they're all attracted by these nice qualities of humility, tolerance, and whatnot. And devotees, of course, are full of these qualities. Guru Maharaj says as much in his commentary here on the third verse. He says that sincere humility attracts the grace and the sympathy of Sri Krishna. So granted, this is within the context of sadhana, but still, there's this idea that humility especially is singled out. But excuse me. Sincere humility attracts the grace and sympathy of Krishna and allows actually the holy name to stay with one despite all the trials and tribulations. I wanted to say a little bit about the story about Rupa and Sanatana Goswami at this point, because actually it's spoken of in two different times in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, but actually in a sense their humility, which is very much a part of bhakti, but their humility drew Mahaprabhu to them. And it's an interesting story because it's on Mahaprabhu's kind of second attempt to go to Vrindavan, and it's retold twice in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahaprabhu was going for a second time to a second attempt to go to Vrindavan. So this is Mahaprabhu going to Vrindavan. I mean, you can imagine how he would be focused and beeline going towards Vrindavan, his very heart. But he actually did this huge detour to go to Ramkeli, where he ultimately, met with Rupa and Sanatana. Mahaprabhu actually said that no one knew this is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahaprabhu says actually nobody knew his reasons for why he went to Ramkeli. He said that really he had no business going there because it was not on the way, to Vrindavan, but that he came there specifically to see the two brothers, Rupa and Sanatana. So this humility of Rupa and Sanatana, their bhakti, actually drew Mahaprabhu off course from pursuing Vrindavan, his very heart. He was drawn off course by the humility and bhakti of Rupa and Sanatana, and they had written letters to Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu mentions this himself, and they had written letters to Mahaprabhu, kind of expressing their heart and showcasing their humility. So their bhakti, but especially their humility, also drew Mahaprabhu to them. And like Guru Maharaj says in his commentary here on the third verse, this sincere humility attracts the grace and sympathy of the Lord. So what could the position, it makes you think of, the position of Rupa and Sanatana, that they could, deflect Mahaprabhu from his path to Vrindavan on his second attempt, his very heart, but he was pulled kind of by the magnetism of their love and humility. And it's beautiful to see, the Lord took so much trouble to go and see his servants. And this is just one of those beautiful things about bhakti. Normally it's the servant that's called. When the queen rings her bell, it's the servant that comes called to the queen. and travels to go see her. The servant travels to go see the master. But in bhakti, in the relationship between Krishna and his devotees, actually Krishna is anxious to have the darshan of his devotees. That's the power of this, of bhakti and of the humility of the devotees. Excuse me. I was reading like one of Dr. O.B.L. Kapoor's books on I think it was on the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or the Goswamis of Vrindavan or something. But he made this. It was anyhow. The chapter was about Sanatana Goswami, and he was mentioning that the actual fact is that he was kind of making this point about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu being drawn by the humility of Rupa and Sanatana, and he was mentioning that actually the fact is that Krishna always goes to see the devotee, not the other way around. Krishna doesn't only go to see the devotee to show him mercy, but he actually goes to fulfill his own selfish desires. Like Krishna goes to fulfill his own desires, which are to see the devotee. So he gives the example of Krishna going actually to Madhavan, which is rather nice, seeing as that's where I live. There's a nice section. That's Madhavan is actually where Dhruva does his austerities and his practice of bhakti. There's a nice verse that says, "Oh child, you should go to the forests of Madhavan to do your practice because the Lord Hari dwells there." But anyhow, he gives the example a little bit later where Krishna actually goes to Madhavan not to give darshan to Dhruva as the culmination of his practice, but actually he goes to have the darshan of his devotee. So it's a very beautiful point that we see in the relationship between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Rupa and Sanatana. Rupa and Sanatana were extremely qualified, competent people. They worked for the government, for the Muslim king. They were the prime minister and the personal secretary or something, and they're described as extremely experienced in all spheres, like in education, intelligence, in physical strength. They were, of course, very experienced in bhakti. They were fluent in several languages. They were exalted both materially and spiritually. Yet, and this is the description that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives when explaining his verses, when explaining his verses of the Siksastakam, especially explaining this third verse. Yet, despite being materially and spiritually exalted, they saw themselves as lower than straw in the street, and this is kind of the repeating definition of humility that we get over and over, that although very exalted, full of all good qualities and accomplishments, that one who's truly embodying this feeling of humility will feel oneself unqualified. The king so this is Mahaprabhu kind of was drawn to them, diverted off his path, but meanwhile going on, the king had asked Rupa Goswami about his opinion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Who was this Hindu ascetic who was causing such a fuss? And of course, Rupa Goswami glorified Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he still at the same time actually showed the utmost respect for the king, the Muslim king. And there's a funny kind of verse, or not a funny verse, but it caught my attention when I was reading it, that he was still so respectful to the king that he actually asked the king, why are you asking me this? It's better that you ask yourself or ask your own mind, because you are the king, so you're the representative of Bhagavan. So again, we see Rupa Goswami kind of always showing respect to others, always offering due respect to everyone, and feeling himself very, very lowly. So the two brothers finally decided to go see Mahaprabhu, and as is, I guess, culturally customary, they took straw between their teeth. This word trina, it comes up, like trinada pisunichana. So they took straw between their teeth. I guess it's a method of showing deference and someone's meowing. Showing deference and whatnot. They're described as tying a cloth around their neck. I think I heard Guru Maharaj. We got a meowing cat. Guru Maharaj has kind of described this as like the begging cloth, the cloth of a sannyasi. So sannyasis wear this uttariya, which is actually meant to hold out and collect alms. So perhaps tying a cloth around their neck kind of symbolizes, again, it's a show of humility, and they fell down, in full dandavats in front of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Dandavats, again, itself is like, I mean, I'm not sure how much it comes out in other traditions of Hinduism, but certainly in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, dandavats is like a prominent thing. So one is actually becoming, like dandava means stick, right? So one is actually falling down like a stick. One is actually becoming humble like a blade of grass with one's body. You can imagine you're becoming like one, a little blade of grass on the ground. So they offered him this dandavats. There's a nice story about dandavats in relation to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. I think you'll forgive me if I don't have it totally correctly, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was going somewhere, and there were two disciples, householder disciples, I think, and it was, really bad weather and muddy, and these devotees, when they saw Bhaktisiddhanta, they got down in the mud and offered him, full dandavats. And I think Bhaktisiddhanta noticed that and asked them, you didn't have to get, covered in mud for me. And the devotees replied that, their dandavats was their only wealth. That was the only wealth that they had. It's a very charming story. So after offering dandavats to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Rupa and Sanatana got up, and Mahaprabhu assured them, of course, of their good fortune. And again, they put straw between their teeth and kind of prayed, saying they were the lowest of men. Although of course they came from very exalted families, they saw themselves as the lowest class of men. That no one was as fallen as them. They compare themselves to Jagai and Madai. Saying that Jagai and Madai's deliverance actually didn't require much effort from Mahaprabhu, but their deliverance would require a lot of effort. And it's quite humorous because we had just kind of read, I forget when it was, but just recently we had kind of read in the Chaitanya Bhagavat the story of Jagai and Madai, and hearing all the things that they did. So to hear, to hear Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami compare themselves to Jagai and Madai, it's kind of humorous. And in fact, just because you see the difference, and so you wonder, how could they actually feel this way? They and not only feeling this way, like they give Mahaprabhu examples. They say, well, at least Jagai and Madai belonged to the Brahmin class. At least Jagai and Madai were Damvasis. They lived in Navadvip. We're not Damvasis. Jagai and Madai never served low-class people. Unlike us, Rupa and Sanatana, we've served the Muslims and the meat-eaters. So with real earnestness, they were glorifying, Jagai and Madai, which is funny when you read the story of Jagai and Madai. You would not think that they were their behavior before their deliverance was worthy of glorification, but somehow or other, because of their humility, Rupa and Sanatana were able to see the good qualities in Jagai and Madai, and instead of listing kind of their faults, they only gave one fault. They only kind of said one thing and said, unfortunately these two were addicted to sinful activities. So, and today now even this, they were addicted to sinful activities. Now we know addiction, is not even a character fault really. We understand that addiction is more of some kind of mental illness. We don't see it so much as a character flaw. So they end the prayer kind of with the idea that if Mahaprabhu does not shower his mercy on them, then it'll be near impossible to find a better candidate, and he won't be able to live up to the name Patita Pavana. He won't be able to fulfill his mission. So they're showing these extreme kind of examples of humility. Mahaprabhu tells them that he tells them that they're his eternal servants, and he initiates them. He gives them their new names there, Rupa and Sanatana. And then it's really incredible. Guru Maharaj quotes this in his he quotes the lines in his commentary. It's really incredible though, because Mahaprabhu tells them, actually, you should abandon your humility. It's breaking my heart. So to think of the level of humility that Rupa and Sanatan were displaying, that Mahaprabhu's teaching is that one should be more humble than a blade of grass, right? That's what his teaching is. But Rupa and Sanatan were showing such a level of humility that Mahaprabhu actually asks them to abandon their humility as it's breaking his heart. So it's hard to imagine that this quality. And when the story is retold again, it's told, I think, in Madhya Lila chapter 1 in the later pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's like a synopsis, and then it's retold again in the 16th chapter. And Mahaprabhu again incredibly says, that their humility is such that it could melt stone. He really emphasizes the humility and respectful nature, offering respect to all others and whatnot in Rupa and Sanatan, and they're really like character studies of the third verse. If the third verse, I mean, every devotee is. You can look at Krishnadas Kaviraj himself. Many devotees are the personification of this verse. This verse is the description of an offenseless chanter, so certainly any advanced devotee will be the personification of this verse. But there's something very special about Rupa and Sanatan, especially with the response that Mahaprabhu said, asking them to give up their humility. Guru Maharaj, like I said, he cites these remarks of Mahaprabhu and this high type of humility. He cites it in his book. And he says that this intensity of humility carries the sadhaka into perfection and remains with them forever. This is a humility that can melt stone, and also, of course, it not like stone, but it can melt Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's heart. That's, as he says, as much. The humilities of these two brothers could melt stone. And therefore, he says, because you have this level of humility, your humility could melt stone. And because of this, therefore, I'm very pleased with you, he says. And he tells them, although you are very exalted, you consider yourself inferior. And because of this, so kind of underline, because of this attitude, Krishna will very soon deliver you. So you just see how much these qualities of the third verse are embedded in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Well, I'll read. I wanted to read Prabhupada's purport just on this because, it's interesting to hear that Mahaprabhu says this. That because of this, Krishna will deliver you very, very soon. Because of this humility and this tolerance, Prabhupada says. The verse here, Mahaprabhu is speaking. He says, "Indeed, the humility of these two brothers could even melt stone, because I was very pleased with their behavior." So we see Mahaprabhu is pleased by humility. That's, humility is a special one, but, we hear these qualities are not directly bhakti. They're not shakshad bhakti, but I forget the word, I have it down somewhere, but they're not directly, but still, Mahaprabhu himself here says, he was very pleased with this behavior. I told them, although you are both very much exalted, you consider yourself inferior. And because of this, Krishna will very soon deliver you. Prabhupada says, such are the qualifications of a pure devotee. Materially, one may be very opulent, experienced, influential, and educated. But if one still thinks oneself lower than straw on the street, one attracts the attention of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Lord Krishna. So if one thinks oneself lower than the straw on the street, one attracts the attention of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Lord Sri Krishna. Although Maharaj Prataparudra was a king, and he took up a broom to cleanse the road for Lord Jagannath's wrath, because of this humble service, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very pleased with the king, and for that reason embraced him. You could also kind of say, because Tripurari Maharaj spent his days in airports and bus stations, delivering, because our Guru Maharaj, took this very humble position of not loitering, but spending days in waiting rooms in airports and bus stations, doing this service of distributing books. He was very much blessed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's a really nice verse that in a song that Shyam Sundar wrote that, because Guru Maharaj had pleased Prabhupada and served the Sankirtan movement, by doing this humble service now, he's blessed and the demigods are showering flowers at his feet. Very nice verse. Anyhow, according to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions, a devotee should never be puffed up by material power. He should know that material power is a result of one's past good activities and is consequently transient. At any moment, all one's material opulence can be finished. Therefore, a devotee is never proud of such opulence. And then here, he says, he is always humble and meek, considering himself lower than a piece of straw. Because of this, the devotees are eligible to return home, back to Godhead. So, the emphasis is given there again. So, I started this all off by talking about how this had drawn these qualities kind of draw the sympathy of the holy name, and how they drew Mahaprabhu to Rupa and Sanatana. And I had forgotten the word, but I have it written down here. It's worth mentioning that the four qualities, they are distinguished from the last line in the verse. So we have humility, tolerance, lack of pratishtha, and offering honor to others. These are distinguished from the last line, which is Kirtanaya Sadahari, the constant glorification, the constant glorification of Hari. Because these verses, they're not in and of themselves directly bhakti, but they are favorable to bhakti, while the constant chanting of Hari is directly bhakti. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur distinguishes even the nishta in relation to these two things. So we're speaking of nishta. There's nishta in relation to the four qualities given, and there's nishta in relation to the constant chanting of the holy name. So it could get a little bit tricky. I mean, I don't want to get into it. You could have somebody who's, fixed in chanting the holy name, but perhaps not fixed in the practice of the four qualities. But really they go hand in hand, because in order to be an offenseless chanter, in order to be able to stay in the association of devotees, which is the only way to become an offenseless chanter, these qualities really are necessary. But the word I was looking for is in relation to the qualities that are not directly bhakti, tad anukula vastu vartini nishta. So that's nishta in relation to the qualities that are favorable. And then there's shakshad bhakti vartini nishta. So nishta in relation to the actual chanting. But among these, like I've mentioned several times, humility is noted as being very, very close, actually, if not an inherent characteristic of bhakti itself. I'll get into that more later, maybe in the next class, the final class. I'm going to go through line by line and speak a little bit about, humility, the lower end and the higher end of humility, and all the wonderful things about grass. And then, the second verse would be the kind of lower and higher ends of tolerance, and all the wonderful things about trees. We'll go through it line by line, and I can get into that a little bit later. But actually, when it comes down to it, humility is very much an essential component of bhakti itself. But going back to the beginning, I was speaking of how this verse kind of, as it's found in the beginning, middle, and end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's found in the beginning, middle, and end of our practice. So in one sense, these are very favorable qualities at the beginning. We find them at the very beginning, even in the kind of the idea, the very first thing, which is surrender to the Guru Padashraya. It starts Ado Shraddha Tato Sadhu Sangha. Then, this is from Rupa Goswami, as he says, Guru Padashraya. So kind of from whatever angle, submission, whatever angle you look at it, submission to the Guru, or submission to the teachings of the Guru also require these four things. We can think about it a little bit. To humble one must humble oneself before the Guru. Tolerance is involved, lack of pratishtha. All these things, all these qualities are essential to being able to do Guru Padashraya. So, submission to the Guru, it requires humility. At the very least, one has to show humility before the teachings, at least theoretically. Prabhupada makes a kind of nice point in the beginning in his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, like, kind of along these lines, he says, at least theoretically, accept that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, so that you can read this book in that frame, in that frame of mind, and really get out what's in there. So it's at least in relation to, at least theoretically in relation to the teachings, you have to humble yourself. And of course, one has to humble oneself before the bearer of Krishna Nam. One must humble oneself before the guru in order to really benefit from what the guru has to teach, because one has to come to the point of realizing, in order to really take advantage of the teachings of the guru, is one has to kind of come to the point to realize that one cannot figure this out all on their own. And this is a very natural kind of humble position to be in, that you can't figure it out all on your own. And we see this again in Sanatana Goswami. When Sanatana Goswami, again another case study in humility, when he went, the basic story is that after kind of a long and arduous journey, after escaping prison, basically kind of being in many ways taking on the position of a refugee, fleeing from his incarceration and the oppression from his former employment, but a refugee in the highest sense of the word, in that he was ultimately seeking refuge at the feet of Mahaprabhu. He goes to meet him, and finally comes in touch with him in Varanasi, and he goes to the house of Chandrasekhar Acharya, and he sits down at the front door and doesn't even go in. So we see again, his feelings of humility in this act. He had already been blessed by Mahaprabhu. He had already been, received full blessings of Mahaprabhu in the previous story that I had told, but still he felt himself undeserving and lowly, and he didn't kind of like go straight in the door. Sanatana Goswami was the prime minister. So he used to have all kinds of important people waiting in line at his door, hoping even just for a brief moment of his time, a brief audience. And now here we see himself feeling so unworthy that he couldn't even, knock on the door. So he sat down outside of the door of Chandrasekhar Acharya, and of course Mahaprabhu in his omniscience knew that he was there. So again, we're seeing this kind of bhakti and humility going hand in hand. Absence of bhakti. Absence of humility means absence of bhakti. Really, bhakti is referred to as the mother of humility. Even if a devotee is, really great, they consider themselves very small. A devotee could be very pure, and they'll refer to themselves as very impure. The devotees are the reservoirs of bhakti, yet when we hear great devotees speak, they speak as if they have no bhakti. There's no one closer to the heart of the Lord, and yet we see like Sanatana Goswami here hesitates to knock on the door, these are not forced things. These are kind of the natural emotions of the devotee. So finally Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami, they meet, they embrace. We over and over again we see the humility shown by Sanatana Goswami, only accepting old torn cloth from Tapan Mishra. He exchanged, he gets rid of his quilt, his fancy quilted cloth, which was actually only a gift. I mean, he didn't go out and search it out. It just came to him of its own accord. But still, he gifted the quilt to a poor man, and he was only going on Madhukari begging for his food. This is someone who probably used to eat state banquets as the prime minister, only going on Madhukari. But the point I'm making is that he humbled himself before Mahaprabhu, like one does in the beginning of one's spiritual life, and he like Arjuna does in front of Krishna also, when one realizes that by one's own personal strength or intelligence or whatever, you can't sort it out. He humbles himself in front of his Guru Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he asks these famous verses come where he asks these important existential questions. Who am I? Why am I suffering? Why are the threefold miseries giving me trouble? And actually, I don't even know how to inquire about the goal of life, let alone, pursue it. So we see again Sanatana Goswami, exemplifying this kind of humility that one would find in the beginning of one's spiritual life. Arjuna does it, like I had mentioned, and so there's this humbling oneself in front of the bearer of Krishna Nam, humbling oneself in front of the knowledge that the guru has, and of course there's also tolerance in this in relation to surrendering oneself to the guru, because after surrendering to the guru, he'll give instructions and activities to do, and instructions and activities not to do also, which actually may require a lot of a lot of tolerance, whether it could be hard work like chopping wood, carrying water, digging trenches or whatever, or it can even just be the tolerance that's needed to live communally in the ashram of the guru. So we see, tolerance is also very much needed at the very beginning of our practice. So this is a stage of bhajana kriya going up through anartha nivritti, and it's primarily dealing with these anarthas and these misplaced kind of values and offenses. They're what prevent the full face of the holy name from making an appearance. So in the kind of going up from the kind of initial faith and surrender to the guru, going up into the stages of actually practicing mindfully the teachings and activities recommended by the guru, this stage of bhajana kriya and anartha nivritti. I mean, again, this verse is like the shield, the I don't know what the right word would be, but like the shield or the tool or whatever, the weapons to deal with all of one's, all of this inauspiciousness that we're carrying with us that's really preventing us from going forward. So, in the middle of our spiritual life, which is, generally for most would be this period of dealing with our anarthas and whatnot. This is kind of like the tool in order to deal with it. Of course, the four qualities and the constant chanting. It's really the constant chanting that does it. But like I've said, that can only happen in the context kind of sadhu sangha and these four qualities. So there are many categories of anarthas. I mean, there's I'm sure it could be several seminars, several classes of all the different things that we have to deal with, from anarthas to offenses. Bhaktivinoda gives a nice list. He says there's 4 defects of the heart. There's the 4 offenses: thirst for material objects, the 4 illusions about spiritual wisdom. So, like the 4 defects of the heart would be attachment. Attachment to objects unrelated to Krishna, the propensity to find fault in others, envy, and pratishta, which is very much the root. There's the nam aparads, the save aparads. There's Vaishnav aparad, Jiv aparad. There's and then on top of that, there's just even all of our own desires, and then there's also distorted and illusions about spiritual wisdom. So it's a whole ball of wax. It's a whole big tangle, that basically sadhana is dealing with. And this is kind of what Mahaprabhu is feeling in the second verse, lamenting the unfortunate position that he has, Durdaivam, of not being able to kind of realize, the significance and magnificence of the holy name because of these offenses. So, he speaks the second verse with humility and lamentation, and Guru Maharaj comments that the sadhakas should feel like this. So in the middle, in this kind of middle section of our practice where we're more really involved in the sadhana, Guru Maharaj has said, the sadhaka in our sadhana should feel like this. He says, humility and the desire to overcome anarthas do not cause them to disappear immediately, but they attract the sympathy and the grace of Krishna. So again, there's an attraction to this verse. We all find people who, we all find these qualities attractive, as does Guru, Krishna, Bhakti Devi, and whatnot. So this verse really is kind of the defense against all these obstacles. These they're personified as demons in in the scripture anarthas. It's the way to remove all of the offenses so that, one can chant the holy name by cultivating the four devotional traits mentioned here, the four qualities. It'll be much easier to always chant because the qualities are necessary, like I said, for non-stop chanting, which is the prescription for offenseless chanting, and they allow us to stay in sadhu sangha. And out of all the offenses, I guess it's worth mentioning the worst offense of all, which is Vaishnava aparad, the mad elephant offense. Offense against the devotees. It's the most serious of them. In the scripture, it's referred to the mad elephant offense because it can go and totally stomp or uproot the bhakti lata bij, the little sprout, little plant of bhakti that it's referred to. Here, it might be the mad cow offense because here our cows can, very quickly destroy a garden that a lot of time and effort was put into. But anyhow, it's said that, there's no other way to protect oneself against this offense of Vaishnava aparad than to fence off one's bhakti lata bij with kind of like the shield of this verse. So the idea being kind of one would build, metaphorically, we have our bhakti lata bij that we're trying to cultivate, and the way to protect it from the mad cows or the mad elephants would to be build a wall of humility. And with a wall, with a fence around a garden, you have to put posts to keep it up. So those posts would be, the posts would be made from the trees of tolerance, the branches from the trees of tolerance. So you put up a fence of humility, stake it down with the trees of tolerance, and protect one's vine of devotion by giving honor to others all around the circumference of this thing. So these are defenses against committing Vaishnava aparad. So if you're constantly glorifying others from left to right, up and down, this is like protecting the circumference on all sides, and then sprinkle the plant with the hearing, the water of the hearing and chanting of the holy name. So we can see it's invaluable in the beginning, and the verse is invaluable in the middle, and also it's invaluable in the end of bhakti. In bhakti, there is no end. The beginning is just a refined version kind of the end. Nothing retires upon achieving the goal in bhakti, basically. Not like karma or yoga or gyan. But so it's there in the end as well. But maybe I'll stop there. I didn't get as far as I wanted to, but it's been an hour, and it's 10:30 now. So I'll just stop there. Next class, maybe we can go very quickly with how this verse kind of applies in the end of our practice, or in the perfection. More we'll see it in the examples of great devotees like Krishnadas Kaviraj and whatnot, how this verse is there in the end. Like all the verses of the Siksastakam, they refer to particular stages of bhakti, but it's not that one ever becomes useless or discarded as one goes forward. The first verse is useful in the beginning as much as it is in the end, and every verse is useful for every devotee at whatever stage they're at. It'll just be kind of, looked at from a different position. So, yeah, that's that. I'll finish on the last, how this verse kind of makes its appearance in the kind of perfection of sadhana, and then in the following, and then I'll go through each line verse by verse and speak a little bit about the analogies and the higher and lower elements of them. So I'll end there, and I'll thank you very much for your attention and everything. If anybody has any questions or corrections or comments that they would like to make, let me know. Okay, well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. It was nice seeing you all. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to say. I don't know if you guys saw, but on Facebook we put out a little poster because for Balaram Purnima and Krishna Janmashtami and Nandotsava, we're going to be having a festival here at Madhavan. We just had a festival in December, January, February. It was really, really great. And so now we're going to have another one. Padmanabh Maharaj will be coming, and he'll be giving classes, of course, on the lead up to the appearance of Krishna, Balaram's appearance as well, and also a seminar on actualizing our relationship with the holy name. So it should be very interesting. It's a really nice time of year here because it's very green. Dauji Kund will be flowing and everything. So I wanted to invite everybody, if you're interested, send me an email and consider coming here for Janmashtami. Okay. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.